It's time for an edition of Rapid Fire, where I have taken chat's questions over the day and will answer them in succession and put them somewhere where you can refer to them. Today's Rapid Fire will be mainly focused on Zoo, which is a deck that I have recently played a lot of. What is my favorite card out of all of the Naxxramas cards? My favorite card is Nerubian Egg. The reason why I like Nerubian Egg is because it's a card that is really powerful, but you need to combine it with something to make it good. I like these cards which aren't great on paper, like they're not just vanilla-ly good. For example, the Yeti, and that you have to combo with stuff, and it's not just good in Zoo, it's also possibly good in other decks, where you can have a control deck where you're just putting Defender of Argus and Sunfury Protector. Pretty nice. What are the upcoming cards in Naxxramas that will be good in Zoo? Well, the potentially good cards will be Deathlord, the 3-mana 2/8. If there aren't that many decks out there which put out really strong minions, then it's not going to be that great for them. Like I was thinking, so they put in a Azure Drake, the battle cry doesn't go off, they get a 4/4. They put in an Ancient of Lore, the battle cry doesn't go off, it's a 5/5. That's bad, but sometimes they get the Druid of the Claw, it's just actually a 4/4. So oftentimes with Deathlord, you'll make them put in, I'm going to say, something like a 3/3 on average. So you got a 3-mana 2/8, when it dies they get, on average, maybe a 3/3. Now obviously it varies quite a lot. So if you consider that, then it's like you got a 3-mana 4 stat worth of card, because you got 10 stats but they get 6 stats. It's like, eh. So Deathlord could be really good, I'll certainly be trying it out. Something that'll definitely be good is Zombie Chow. That card is going to be absolutely insane. 1-mana 2/3, Zoo is after all board control deck, so it runs Flame Imp, which kills your own health. Why not give them health? That's absolutely fine. 1-mana 2/3 is going to make it so that Zoo has so many more strong starts. And finally, in the final week of Naxxramas, there's going to be the Echoing Ooze, which is a 2-mana 2/4 if you don't play anything, but you play it with Shadowed Sun Cleric, and you're paying 5 mana for a 3/2, the Shadowed Sun Cleric, and then 2 2/3s, which is a total value of 7/8. That's amazing. Yes. Can you please explain why you place minions where you place them in Zoo? So the thing about the placement is Zoo has two things that affect placement. It has the Direwolf Alpha and it has Defender of Argus. Now the nice thing about the thing about the Defender of Argus is you're more likely to buff things in the middle. So therefore you should aim to place cards that you want to buff in the middle. Those cards would usually be definitely the Egg, generally the weaker cards, because if the cards are going to die to 1 damage, then you want to buff them out of the 1 damage range. Perhaps more importantly though, once you get a lot of minions out, you want your Direwolf Alpha to enter play and then be able to give more than just the adjacent minions plus 1 attack. The way that works is you place your Direwolf Alpha down, and then you use the guy to the left of it, who is hopefully a weak 1/1, and then it gets buffed into a 2/1, you send that into the opponent's minion, and then it dies, and then the minion to the left of it slides over and it also gets plus 1 attack. So that's one of those finesse things you can do with Zoo. Creative accounting wolf, I like to call the Direwolf Alpha. What would I say to people that bad talk about net decks or specific decks in general, such as how many people hate Zoo? A lot of people play this deck for different reasons. I myself, at least this season of August, am playing it in order to reach top 16 legend. So in order to do that, I'm going to play whatever deck I think is strongest. And that tends to often be the net decks. In this particular part where I'm climbing the ladder really quickly, I'd say it's Zoo. Now people have some right to be annoyed at Zoo, because it's one of the most common decks right now. It's relatively easy to play, and people lose to it all the time. And then it's losing to it, and then you don't think your opponent really did a good job. It's like, oh, you just played the cards, and then you tapped, and then you played more cards, and then you sent them at me, and then you Doomguarded when you have no cards in hand. Wow. but in actuality there is some skill involved in Zoo. When we're talking about hitting the really top ranks though, it turns out that Zoo itself may not be that great. The top 16 legends have traditionally not held that many Zoo players. I hold the sense that net decks are inevitable. If there are good decks out there, of course you're going to play them. Of course people are going to play them. I'd say like people have a misplaced sense of pride if they think that net decking is wrong. What are you going to do? You're going to create your own creation? Now, of course, creating your own creation, that's how often people will get to the top of Legend. They make some innovation, and then people don't know about it yet, and then they do really well with it. And then it becomes the next net deck. It becomes the next thing that everyone tries out. So net decking is inevitable. You shouldn't feel bad about doing it. You shouldn't feel like a scumbag when you're playing any deck. So that leads me to... I mentioned something about Zoo's skill. So I have been asked in the past. I got to rank 5 with Zoo, and then I couldn't get any higher. Why? So it turns out you can play Zoo incorrectly. There are different levels of Zoo. First of all is realizing, and I'm actually going to address this question as well, should I be more focused on board controlling or should I focus on face hitting when playing Zoo? The most common misconception about Zoo is that it's a rush deck, it's a hit their face deck, but it's actually one of the most board control-y decks out there. Depending on version, but the most common version is the board control version. So almost always you should be seeking to get good exchanges with your opponents. You should probably be seeking to use your hand as fast as possible, so when you top deck your Doomguards and or Soulfires, you have few cards left. So there's two main arts, the art of trading well, and the art of just knowing when to spend your hand as fast as possible and when you actually need to hold off on playing a card and tap instead, so that you can draw out your plays over time. And then another play is just making sure you are fearless when you tap. You're at 10 health, tap if it's right, and it's usually right if your opponent isn't immediately showing lethal, and you're not against one of the classes which can do a certain amount of damage, so you need to know how much damage you can take from all the classes. What are Zoo's worst matchups? So the thing about Zoo is that there are no matchups that are currently known to be awful for Zoo. It used to be that Freeze Mage was really good, and perhaps it still is, but with Nerubian Egg and with the Creeper, it's a lot more durable against Area of Effect. But on the flip side, and here's the reason why Zoo isn't necessarily a deck that's very common in the top Legend, it doesn't have any great matchups. So it ends up being that you end up against really good players getting about a 50-50 record, perhaps. Or maybe if you're a really good Zoo player, you can get that up to 60-40. And maybe if you're actually like a genius level Zoo player, maybe you can hit a top 16 legend. But it's pretty unheard of. There are all sorts of decks which are going to be slightly favored or slightly disfavored, but the thing about Zoo is that it's just very consistent, so there's nothing that's too good or too bad against it. Can I say something about the Void Terror / Power Overwhelming / Nerubian Egg style of Zoo? That's a style of Zoo that's recently come into popularity as well, and it's something that I think is a completely valid deck. I happen to like the more vanilla version without the Void Terrors and without the Power Overwhelmings because I think it's more consistent, and I think it might be better when matched up against the Void Terror version. The Power Overwhelming Void Terror version is cool and it's flashy and it's about the same, but it holds certain matchups that are better and it holds certain matchups that are worse. Why is there a copy of Hellfire in my Zoo? Why aren't you running Shadow Flame instead? Why aren't you running 2 copies of Hellfire? Why are you running Hellfire at all? Because you're just killing your own minions. Well, the versions of Zoo that I'm running with Hellfire are mostly because right now there is a lot of Zoo out there. So when you play against the Zoo, you suddenly have this magic card which, if you're somehow losing completely, which happens all the time in Zoo, one side gets a huge advantage, you have this one magical card which will completely turn the tides. It's also why Handlock is pretty good against Zoo, on a side note, because they have the Hellfire. It's so good that in Zoo vs. Zoo, you would want to keep the Hellfire. if you happen to know they were Zoo, which you tend to assume when the opponent is Warlock now. Why no Shadow Flame instead of Hellfire? Most of the Zoo's minions don't end up doing that much damage, and the only reason why you'd really want to play the card Shadow Flame / Hellfire anyways is if you were losing horribly, because you don't need to Shadow Flame your opponent's board. If you have board control, you can just get the favorable trades. So perhaps the thinking behind using Shadow Flame is, I don't want to kill my own guys, so I'm just going to Shadow Flame one guy and then all my other guys are going to survive. But that's the wrong way of thinking about it, because if you have your guys out already, there's no reason you need to Shadow Flame, you just kill their guys. So the reason for the Hellfire is when you're behind, and it's going to happen sometimes against you, you Hellfire. Sometimes it's a finisher, there's only one copy of it because sometimes it's a dead card against quite a few decks, like Druid, or against Miracle. What should I mulligan when I am playing Zoo? When you're going first, you should try to aim for having a 1-drop. Even though the Knife Juggler and the Nerubian Egg are really good cards, they are still cards that you should replace if you have no 1-drop. And you should only be looking for certain 1-drops also. So if you have an Abusive Sergeant, against some classes like Priest or Shaman or Warrior, kind of, and not so much Priest because they have Cleric, and not so much Shaman because they have Creeper, but Warrior, you might want to get rid of Abusive Sergeant most of the time. So you're looking for good individual 1-drops like Flame Imp and Argent Squire and Voidwalker, and Zombie Chow when it comes around. And if you have the 1, then you want a 2, and if you have the 2, you want a 3. So your best draw is a 1, 2, 3. If you're up against Zoo, keep the Soulfire. If you're going second, then you want either 1, 1, 2, 3 as the ideal. So 2 1-drops, a 2-drop, and a 3-drop. Again, if you don't have any 1-drops, then replace everything, including Abusive Sergeants. When you're going second, you have a little more flexibility. Perhaps you can keep a hand like Nerubian Egg and Abusive Sergeant. Or perhaps you can keep a hand like Nerubian Egg and Shadowed Sun Cleric, even though you have no 1-drops, and replace the other 2. And keep Soulfire against Zoo, going first or second. Should I put in Siphoned Soul, or Lord Jaraxxus, or Twisting Nether, or any card like a Argent Commander, or any card that costs 6 or more into my Zoo? No, because it costs too much and you're going to discard it to Doomguard and Soulfire. The point of Zoo is to use your cards as quickly as possible, and then use cards which take advantage of the fact that you have no hand, like Doomguard or Soulfire. If you're using cards that are high cost, then you're doing it wrong. Should I put Leeroy Jenkins in my Zoo deck? No, because this is a board control deck, and you're not going for the face. It turns out that Leeroy Jenkins is only good as a finisher for super rush decks. So playing a card that you can only play at the end to deal 6 damage is really a bad idea, because you're going to discard it to Doomguard before then, you're going to discard it to Soulfire before then. It's no good. I'm considering cutting the Soulfire or the Doomguard from my Zoo deck. I think the drawback is too big. Those are the keystone cards of Zoo, and you should never cut them. The entire point of Zoo is to play your hand quickly and then take advantage of the fact that 0 mana for 4 damage is absurd, and 5 mana for 5/7 charge is absurd. Of course, you shouldn't be afraid to use your Soulfire early against your opponent's 3/2 or something, because the tempo swing is very large, and you can recover quickly as a Zoo player by making use of your life tap. So please never remove those cards. And that wraps up our Zoo Rapid Fire.